This video delves into a real criminal case that has left an indelible mark on the true crime landscape. All information presented is meticulously sourced from public court records, official police reports, and verified news sources, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of the narrative. In 1993, the small town of West Memphis, Arkansas, was shaken to its core when three 8-year-old boys, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, were found brutally murdered in a wooded area. The crime scene was particularly disturbing, with the boys' bodies bearing signs of a violent and savage attack, leaving investigators and the community reeling in shock and horror. The case began to unfold on May 5, 1993, when the three boys were reported missing by their frantic parents, who had been searching for them everywhere. A search party was quickly formed, comprising of local residents, police officers, and volunteers who combed the area, scouring every inch of the woods, creeks, and neighborhoods.
The boys' bodies were found the next day in a wooded area near a creek, sparking a massive investigation that would go on to capture the nation's attention.
The police investigation that followed was extensive and painstaking, with officers collecting evidence from the crime scene, interviewing potential witnesses, and following up on every lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. You're watching Dark Verdict, where we investigate the cases that haunt us, leaving an indelible mark on our collective psyche. The West Memphis 3 case is one of the most infamous in American true crime history, with a labyrinthine narrative that has left investigators, experts, and the public baffled and intrigued. As the investigation continued, police began to suspect that the murders might be the work of a satanic cult, a theory that was fueled by the presence of strange symbols and markings at the crime scene. This led them to look into local individuals who might be involved in such activities, including those with a history of occult practices or affiliations with fringe groups. The investigation led police to 3 local teenagers, Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jessie, Misskelley, who were known to be interested in heavy metal music and the occult. The police obtained a confession from Misskelley, which was later disputed, and the 3 teenagers were arrested and charged with the murders. However, many people believe that the police investigation was flawed and that the 3 teenagers were wrongly accused, a theory that has gained significant traction over the years. The evidence collected from the crime scene included a piece of rope, a knife, and some clothing, but none of it was conclusively linked to the 3 teenagers, raising more questions than answers. In fact, many of the physical evidence points to other potential suspects, including a man named Jerry Driver, who was known to have a history of violent behavior and had been previously arrested for assault. The case took a surprising turn when it was discovered that the police chief had mishandled some of the evidence, which led to his resignation and further eroded the credibility of the investigation. As the case progressed, it became clear that the investigation was not as straightforward as it seemed, with a complex web of twists and turns that would challenge even the most seasoned investigators. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and questionable witness testimony, which has been widely criticized by experts and advocates. The defense, on the other hand, argued that the police had coerced the confession from Misskelley and that the 3 teenagers were innocent, a claim that has been supported by many who have examined the case. The case went to trial, and in 1994, Echols, Baldwin, and Misskelley were found guilty of the murders, a verdict that would have far-reaching consequences for the 3 men and their families. But here is the thing: many people, including the families of the victims, believe that the 3 teenagers were wrongly convicted, a theory that has gained significant traction over the years. The case has sparked a lot of debate and controversy, with many arguing that the police investigation was botched and that the real killer is still out there, waiting to be caught. In 2011, the 3 men entered into a plea deal, known as an Alford plea, which allowed them to maintain their innocence while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them, a move that has been seen as a strategic maneuver to secure their release from prison. The sentencing in 1994 had been severe.
Damien Echols, who was 18 at the time of his arrest, was sentenced to death and sent to the Varner Unit Supermax facility in Arkansas, where he spent nearly 2 decades on death row.
Jason Baldwin and Jessie Misskelley each received sentences of life in prison plus 40 years. Judge David Burnett presided over the trials and drew heavy criticism from legal observers for a number of rulings that limited the defense's ability to present evidence, including restrictions on expert testimony about false confessions and the exclusion of certain witnesses the defense wished to call. The aftermath of the case has been marked by a series of events and developments that have shed new light on the investigation, including the release of new evidence and the emergence of new witnesses. In 2012, a documentary film called West of Memphis was released, which examined the case and the investigation in detail, raising many questions about the handling of the case and the guilt of the 3 teenagers. The film sparked a renewed interest in the case, with many people calling for a re-examination of the evidence and a new investigation into the murders. The specific location where the boys were discovered was a drainage ditch in a wooded area known locally as Robin Hood Hills, situated behind the Blue Beacon truck wash near Interstate 40. When searchers pulled the bodies from the shallow, muddy water on May 6, 1993, they found that the boys had been hogtied with their own shoelaces, their wrists bound to their ankles. The Crittenden County Medical Examiner, Dr.
Frank Peretti, performed the autopsies and noted extensive injuries, though later independent forensic experts would challenge several of his conclusions, particularly his determination that some of the wounds were caused by a knife rather than by animal predation after death.
Before the West of Memphis documentary, it was actually the HBO series Paradise Lost that first brought the case to a national audience. The first film, Paradise Lost: The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills, was directed by Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky and premiered in 1996. It gave viewers an inside look at the trial proceedings and the small-town atmosphere that shaped the prosecution's narrative.
2 sequels followed, Paradise Lost 2, Revelations in 2000, which examined emerging doubts about the convictions, and Paradise Lost 3, Purgatory in 2011, which covered the new forensic findings and the eventual release of the 3 men.
The trilogy received multiple Emmy nominations and was instrumental in building a nationwide support movement. That support movement attracted major public figures who used their platforms to advocate for the case. Musician Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam performed benefit concerts to raise money for the Legal Defense Fund. Actor Johnny Depp contributed financially and appeared publicly alongside Echols after his release. Natalie Maines of the Dixie Chicks attended court hearings and wore Free the West Memphis 3 shirts during nationally televised performances. Perhaps most significantly, filmmaker Peter Jackson and his partner Fran Walsh personally funded new forensic testing on the crime scene evidence and helped produce the West of Memphis documentary, hiring private investigators to re-examine the case from scratch.
One critical development that emerged from the renewed investigation was the identification of Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather, as a person of interest.
In 2007, DNA analysts found a hair consistent with Hobbs' mitochondrial DNA profile inside one of the ligatures used to bind the victims. A second hair found at the crime scene was matched to David Jacoby, a friend of Hobbs who had been with him on the evening the boys disappeared. Hobbs denied any involvement and was never charged. He later filed a defamation lawsuit against Natalie Maines, which was dismissed by a judge in 2012. The defense team argued that this DNA evidence, which was not available during the original trials, pointed away from Echols, Baldwin, and Misskelley and toward individuals who had not been adequately investigated in 1993. The reliability of Jessie Misskelley's confession became one of the most scrutinized aspects of the case. Misskelley, who had a measured IQ of 72, was interrogated by West Memphis police for approximately 12 hours on June 3, 1993, but only roughly 46 minutes of the session were recorded. During the recorded portion, Misskelley gave inconsistent details, initially placing the murders at noon when the boys were actually still in school at that hour, and later changing the time after being corrected by detectives.
Vicky Hutchison, a key witness who had originally told police she attended a supposed occult gathering with Echols, fully recanted her testimony years later, stating that she had fabricated the account under pressure from investigators who had threatened her with the loss of custody of her son.
Jerry Driver was not merely a random suspect considered by outside observers. He was actually Damien Echols' juvenile probation officer in Crittenden County and had been one of the first people to direct police attention toward Echols after the murders. Driver had a documented personal fixation on occult activity among local teenagers and had compiled files on young people he suspected of satanic involvement well before the murders occurred. His role in steering the investigation toward Echols raised pointed questions about whether the probe was shaped by genuine evidence or by one official's pre-existing assumptions. The broader context matters as well.
The early 1990s saw a wave of so-called satanic panic sweep across the United States, with law enforcement agencies in multiple states pursuing allegations of ritual abuse that were later debunked. In West Memphis, that cultural climate merged with grief and fear to produce an investigation that many legal scholars now cite as a textbook example of confirmation bias driving a criminal prosecution.
After their release on August 19, 2011, the three men took vastly different paths.
Damien Echols settled in New York City with his wife Lori Davis, whom he had married while on death row in 1999 after she began writing to him as a supporter. He published a memoir titled Life After Death in 2012, detailing the psychological toll of 18 years in solitary confinement.
Jason Baldwin moved to Seattle and enrolled at the University of Washington, pursuing studies while also working with the Innocence Project to advocate for other prisoners he believed were wrongly convicted. Jessie Misskelley returned to the West Memphis area and has largely stayed out of the public spotlight. Supporters have continued to rally on behalf of the victims and the convicted alike, with organized events held at the Crittenden County Courthouse in West Memphis calling for a full reinvestigation that could definitively establish what happened to Stevie, Michael, and Christopher on that spring evening in 1993. Subscribe to Dark Verdict for more deep dives into the cases that demand a second look.